Okay, today is Sunday 29th September 2024, about 10 a.m. Air temperature about 30 degrees centigrade, 86 Fahrenheit. So the summer weather still hasn't finished yet, and temperature is probably going to go up to about 33, 34 later today, and maybe 85% humidity. Maybe next week it might start to get a bit cooler. So I'm going to talk about lessons learned at the end of summer 2024. And they were quite tough lessons, so I might ramble on for some time. So a quick initial summary. Where I live has a subtropical climate. Winters are cool and dry, and summers are high temperatures, high humidity, and long periods of intense, very heavy rain. And during this 2024 summer, I had a major problem that half of my MEDAKA died during the summer. Basically, as I talk about in later on in this video, 1/3 of the losses occurred because dragonfly larvae in my pond ate all the MEDAKA there, which, okay, is unlucky. Nothing much I can do about that except be more careful not to allow dragonflies to lay their eggs in there. But 2/3 of the losses arose because the weaker MEDAKA, such as elderly adults and young juveniles I had in outdoor tubs, were not tough enough to survive the battering they took from the intense, very heavy rain hammering down on the water surface of these relatively shallow tubs. As a benchmark for my conclusion about that, the stronger young adult MEDAKA in outdoor tubs exposed to the heavy rain survived okay, and weaker MEDAKA I had in outdoor tubs, but which was sheltered from the very heavy rain, also survived okay. And I'll go into at length how I reached that conclusion later. Now, I'll mention that one of the main reasons I continue to make these videos is to use my YouTube channel as a sort of video diary, so I can look back at the videos and maybe jog my memory what happened previously during previous seasons throughout the year, and also, actually sitting here and thinking what to say makes me focus on maybe what went right, what went wrong, maybe what improvements I can make next year if that's necessary. And in fact, quite a lot went wrong this summer. So I think I must again emphasize, as I have done on previous videos now and again, that I'm far from being an expert on keeping MEDAKA outdoors. Definitely I got a few things wrong this summer. So I'll maybe set the scene on what I was hoping to achieve this year by including this following extract from a video I made 6 months ago, at the beginning of March this year, called MEDAKA Ricefish Outdoors Breeding Plan 2024. Now that can be used as a measure of what I was hoping to achieve, And now I can talk about what went wrong and I actually failed to achieve, if you like, failed to achieve my objectives. So thinking about how many MEDAKA I want to keep, or aim for as a permanent stock, I have these 5 tubs. I like to maintain overall a shoal of about 10 to 12 MEDAKA in each tub. There are some in this tub, but they're a bit shy today. So at least about 10 to 15 in each tub. So for the 5 tubs, the total I'll aim for is 70 MEDAKA. And then if I look at my pond, I recently cleared it out, took out all the plants and set it up as a MEDAKA pond. So I'd like to see, I think, a big shoal of, say, 200 MEDAKA in this pond. They happily, live together with the goldfish that are in there. I've proved that goldfish at this size don't eat MEDAKA. So I think 200 mixed MEDAKA in there is what I really want to aim for, and what I think I'd really like to see. So if we add up the MEDAKA I want in my 5 tubs, which is a total of 70 in the 5 tubs, and 200 in the pond, I get that I really want to aim for, by the time I finish the breeding plan, by the time I finish breeding, I want to aim to have 270 fish. Now, at the moment, in the tubs, there's probably already about 70 MEDAKA, and there's about 50 in the pond. That gives a current total of about 120 MEDAKA. Now, that might appear okay to be easy to calculate. I want to have 270 fish. I've got 120, so I need to breed an additional 150 MEDAKA this year. But what I've also got to think about is any losses I have in some of the current stock, 120, due to old age, disease, accidents. So I've got 120 fish at the moment. Most of them hatched in spring last year, so they're nearly a year old. By the end of the year, my assumption is that only 60 of that out of the 120 I've got will still be alive. So my calculation before was to breed 150 MEDAKA to increase the numbers to where I want to be. I want to see a big shoal in this pond. So that was 150, and I would now need to breed maybe another 60 to make up for losses from the current stock throughout this year. So rounding it up, 150 plus 60, rounding it up, I need to breed a total of about 200 this year. So back to the present. Now, in the spring of this year, in accordance with my plan I've just described, I bred about 200 new MEDAKA. Some of the elderly MEDAKA died during the first part of the summer. So in mid-July, when I went on my long vacation, I estimated I had a total of about 270 fish. In these 5 tubs, I had about 80 young adults hatched in early spring. In my pond, I had 70 adults and juveniles. As I explained before, the dragonfly larvae ate all those, so the pond now has about 3 MEDAKA left in. And I had 4 backup tubs, which was a new thing for this summer. 1, 2, 3, 4, where I tried to back up whatever strains of MEDAKA I've got, and in case something went wrong with the tubs or the pond. And in those 4, I had a total of 90 fish, mainly elderly adults and young juveniles hatched in late spring. Now, I also had sort of 30 very young juveniles, which I thought probably wouldn't survive exposed to heavy rain and whatever. So I kept them in a tank, still outdoors, but under cover. So there's 30 of those in an undercover tank. So that adds up to 270. But when I came back from my long vacation, about 2 months later, in early September, I found out of those 270 fish I got in July, I found I'd only got about 140 MEDAKA surviving. So that means 130 died. And I think if you've seen that extract I did from back in March, just about all those fish that I had in March in early spring this year, all of those died. None of them survived through the summer. Now, it could be said that most of those losses occurred because I was away for about 2 months, and the MEDAKA were perhaps not properly cared for. Let me move my chair. However, I mean, I know the fish were properly fed, not too much, not too little, and water conditions were still very good when I returned from the vacation after 2 months. So I tend to think that things would probably not have been very much different than if I'd stayed at home and tried to look after the fish for that 2 months. I think the losses would still have occurred because it would, during the time it would have taken me to try to work out what the problem was. Now, in a minute, I'll ramble on about the details of what probably happened. But for those who don't want to listen to all of that, I'll summarize my conclusions now. So, in midsummer, in July, I had 270 MEDAKA in outdoor tubs and the pond. 2 months later, towards the end of summer in September, I had 140 MEDAKA surviving. So that, in effect, 130, or about half of my MEDAKA, had died in the 2 months of very hot, humid, very high rainfall, tropical-like summer weather I get at my subtropical location. The probable reasons for this: about 1/3 of the losses, maybe 50 fish, were eaten by dragonfly larvae I didn't know had got into my pond, and I did a previous video about this recently. Another third of the losses, maybe 40 fish, were elderly adult MEDAKA that had survived okay outdoors in last year's summer 2023 weather conditions, but in this second summer in 2024, the weather was probably too tough and debilitating for them. And the other 1/3, maybe about 40 fish, were young juveniles that had probably not had time to grow strong enough to survive outdoors in the tough conditions of the summer weather. Now, I think, although the summer weather here, very hot, very humid, very high rainfall, I think high temperatures are probably not so much of a factor in causing the losses. I had the more vulnerable, very young juveniles I thought wouldn't survive heavy rainfall, etc. And I had those in tubs outdoors, but under cover, sheltered from the rain, and they survived okay. So they were at the same high temperature, but they were okay. They didn't have too much of a problem. So overall, the logical conclusion is that the weaker MEDAKA, such as elderly adults and young juveniles kept in outdoor tubs, suffer considerably from the extended periods of very, very heavy rain I get at my location in the summer. Now, not only maybe there's the physical impact or physical effect of the impact from very heavy rain hammering down on the water surface in tubs where there's water is only about 30 cm to 40 cm deep. And there will also be the effects on the health of the weaker MEDAKA from the relatively sudden temperature and pH changes you get in the water quality. If you get, maybe 100 mm, 150 mm of rainfall within a short period of time. Now, young adults will survive because they're stronger, but I think it's probable, in those sort of conditions, even young adults will suffer in these sort of, or weaken them in their these sort of debilitating conditions from heavy rainfall. So, I think it's preferable to try and take precautions or measures to try and avoid the effects of this very heavy rainfall. Now, I don't think I was aware of this sort of problem last summer because I had relatively fewer elderly adults, and so the percentage losses probably would not have been so noticeable, or at least I didn't notice them anyway. But I think next summer I'm definitely going to have to try and build a covered area for all my tubs. Just a simple cover, all be open-sided, just to stop the effects of very, very heavy rain hammering down for a few hours at a time. One other thing I'll add, just to put this in context or whatever, apart from the dragonfly problem, which is something you can try and avoid because I have usually put netting over my tubs. Perhaps it could be said that weaker elderly adult and young juvenile MEDAKA are probably not at risk of not surviving outdoors in summers like mine, like a tropical like summer similar to mine, and that is in the same way that the elderly adults and young juveniles are probably similarly at risk if they're outdoors in cold winters below 5 degrees centigrade in temperate climates. Perhaps the same as summers here. The young adults are tough; they will survive. Probably the weaker elderly adults and the smaller young juveniles probably would not survive, or they're at risk of not surviving. So that's my conclusions. I'll now ramble on about my detailed analysis that led me to these conclusions. Starting with these 5 outdoor tubs. In mid-July, I had 80 strong, healthy young adults, total of them, that had hatched in early spring. Now, 2 months later, at the end of the summer, in September, I still have about 70 of these young adults. I think maybe this around about 10% loss is to be expected. During this summer weather, high temperatures and intense heavy rainfall. So that was fine, not a problem. Now I'll move to my pond. So in my pond in mid-July, I had a mix of 70 adults and juveniles of various ages. In early September, after a couple of months, only 3 MEDAKA survived. Maybe you can see them down there somewhere. Yeah, so there's some fish over there. Now, see if I can avoid the reflections. Anyway, now some of my fish may have died because they were elderly, etc. I think most of the loss was due to being eaten by dragonfly larvae, and I did a recent video on this. However, since I moved all the floating plants out of this pond, I found there were a large number of red platies in here, which I used to keep when I had goldfish. I used to keep the platies to eat mosquitoes. The goldfish are very good at eating mosquitoes. And it appears that, probably most of these platies have survived. I never counted them before, but there are quite a lot there. So, in my recent video, I gave a reason why I thought they survived. Because this was very heavily covered with floating plants, and MEDAKA maybe survived by staying in the open water, avoiding predators like dragonfly larvae hiding in the plants. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But I still think it's quite strange that all these platies survived predations of dragonfly larvae, and the MEDAKA didn't. So maybe it's still an open question of why all the MEDAKA died, but I don't think there's any more analysis I can make on that. I still blame the dragonflies. Now, in these 4 backup tubs that I used while I was away on my long vacation, just to see, just to back up during the summer. In mid-July, I had 90 MEDAKA total in the 4, a mixture of about 30 elderly adults who'd already lived through and survived the last year's 2023 summer. So, as I say, I call them elderly. So they'd already been through one summer. And I had 60 young juveniles born in late spring, so they were not that big, not nowhere near fully grown. And by early September, out of that 90 total fish, only 40 still survived. So 50 of them didn't survive the summer. Now all the 30 elderly adults died, and I think that's because they were too weak just to survive through a second summer. And 20 of the young juveniles died, probably because they hadn't grown enough to develop reasonable strength. So that means I lost all the 30 elderly adults and loss of about 30% of the juveniles. Now, just in the back of my mind, I'll also mention these backup tubs were new. Very, very, very cheap plastic storage boxes. I scrubbed them to try and remove any chemical, mold release agents, etc. And usually I would have left them outdoors for a time so they would, if you like, weather in. But I was in a hurry and I used them immediately. So there's still a slight doubt in my mind that where there was any remaining chemical release agent or whatever there, or whether the toxicity, the very cheap plastic of the tubs were a bit toxic, and maybe, you know, these two things may have contributed towards the losses, but I doubt it. Just something in the back of my mind. I also kept 30 very young juveniles in a tank throughout the summer. I thought they were, you know, not strong enough to survive, exposed to all the elements through the summer weather. The tank was kept outdoors but under cover to protect, against the worst of the summer weather, and all 30 survived. So this leads me to a conclusion that high summer temperatures appeared not to be a problem with them, and so I doubt that high temperatures are a significant factor in my loss of half of my MEDAKA. But all these 30 survived, and they all avoided the adverse effects of the summer's very heavy, intense rain hammering down on the water surface. So that brings me to the conclusion, lesson learned. Is there anything in there worth looking at? Don't think so. It's a nice reflection. So the lesson learned is, to reduce this risk of high losses of MEDAKA kept outdoors in my locations, tropical like summer weather. I think it's essential next year to provide all my tubs with a covered area to protect against the battering they get from this very intense, very heavy rainfall, which might go on for several hours at a time. Okay,